Hey everybody, Tim Adams here with another Hangout on Air regarding church tech. And this week we're going to be talking about what are some of the snares that are involved when we are asked as techs, either paid or volunteer, to write up a upgrade proposal for the church. And with us we have Chip Dizard and we have Paul Allen Clifford. So the first thing that we're going to cover is what constitutes an upgrade. Is it buying a new piece of equipment? Is it a certain dollar amount? Um, what is it that we need to define upgrade so that we're not getting lost in the details, as it were? So, Paul, how would you define the term upgrade?
Well, I think any time that you need to get more than one person's approval for what you're doing, I think that would be worth defining it as an upgrade. And that changes from church to church. Some say, hey, as long as you spend less than $100, the senior pastor can approve that. Some say, no, we have to vote on everything. Some are much more hierarchical, and whatever the senior pastor wants is what you get, and everything in between. So I think that probably in most cases it's not picking up an SD card from Best Buy. It's probably picking up some piece of equipment that changes your system in a notable way. So it's probably going to be at least a few $100s, but more likely several hundred to several thousand is probably what I would guess you have to actually write out a proposal for, instead of just firing off an email and saying, hey, what if we picked up this? I got a good deal on one, you know?
Yeah, that makes absolutely perfect sense. I mean, batteries are not an upgrade, right? Expendables, um, even paying for a monthly streaming service isn't necessarily an upgrade. So I definitely like how you classified that, because a lot of churches you're going to have to get approval from somebody above you, probably the person that asked you to write the proposal, right? If not the church board at large. So now that we have that defined, let's talk about some of the more common pitfalls and problems with being asked to kind of head that up. And I want to say at the beginning here that if you're asked to do an upgrade proposal, don't be afraid or don't be scared. But I would encourage you to ask questions. Find out exactly what they're expecting of you. Find out what the process is going to be, because the last thing you want to do is get into a situation that I was in a number of years ago, where I was asked to do an upgrade proposal for audio, lighting, and projection. And I was coming out to a six-figure total, just because that's what needed to happen. And took 8 months of my time, volunteered, whatever, to create this thing, and then they relegated it to a committee, and they went and talked to all the people that I'd already talked to, and then by that time I was like, see, I'd kind of changed churches for other reasons, and what ended up happening is they shelled out a lot of money to have a professional system integrator come in and tell them the exact same thing that I had told them. And that's not me patting myself on the back or anything. It's not ego talking. That's just reality. They could have saved that money and put it towards upgrading equipment rather than being told the same thing because they didn't have trust in what I was telling them. So, with that being said, what are some of maybe the experiences that you've had, Paul?
Well, I don't do a lot of system installation. I've done a little bit at my church when we were smaller. Now we hire someone to do it, since no one at our church does it week in and week out. It's just hit and miss, the few of us that have some experience in that. But and that's really not my business model. My business model is more training and writing and speaking, that kind of thing. So with that said, I do have a few stories. Like the first time I was asked to do anything like this, we were going from a single center projector to two side screens. And the pastor gave me an amount of money and said, we need to do this. And so I talked with everyone else that might have some knowledge about it, and we realized not enough money, and this isn't not enough money to do it the right way. We didn't even have enough money to do it the wrong way. So you know how sometimes you can kind of get by doing this and doing that, and well, it's not designed to do this, but it'll do it kind of. We didn't even have enough money for that. So I had to go back to the pastor and say, look, that's not enough money. We need another $1,000 for this. We need, I can get the projectors for what you want, but we really need a switcher, and that's going to be another $1,000 for the entry-level bargain basement Videonics MX Pro that we got way back in the day. And that doesn't include the cabling or the mounts for it or any of those other things to make this happen. And so we went back to him and told him that, and to his credit, he went back and talked to the board and all, and we got enough money to do the kind of bargain basement system that was really all that we could afford. But I will say one thing about giving the dollar amount as a part of what you want to do, at least get you in the ballpark. But I think that the leaders of churches have to realize that when we're doing these estimates, sometimes it just can't be done. You know, sometimes you can't even do it the wrong way for that kind of money. So they have to keep that in mind as they're making these decisions. But it is helpful as a tech when you get back, hey, I need to run a camera to these two overflow rooms. I said, no, we're in the bargain basement, what can I find used territory, as opposed to the doing it the right way territory. So at least you know around what you're dealing with. And even if it's nearly impossible, you know, hey, we need to do a miracle as opposed to, oh, this is easy. Do you want to go 4K while we're at it? You know, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also important to note here that upgrade plans need to be realistic. You know, I get very wary as a consultant and as an integrator that with equipment that advertises itself as accomplishing, say, a set of functions that other competition or, you know, other products are costing, you know, 5 times more in doing the same thing. I have to really warn people off about knowing what a certain piece of equipment should cost. Not what can I find it for, but how much it costs. And that's really going to go a long way towards getting yourself within realistic ballparks that Paul is talking about. So, for instance, sure, you can find an audio mixer for $200, right? And it may advertise itself as being able to do the functions of a $600 mixer. However, you have to look at, okay, well, if all the other mixers that I'm finding that are more name brand or more well-known, let's say, are costing in the neighborhood of $600 and this guy's costing $2, why is that? What shortcuts are they taking that the other manufacturers are not? What kind of support can I expect? These are all questions that you need to be asking yourself simply because you don't want to get caught on the back end of this upgrade in a situation where the piece of equipment doesn't function properly as advertised and you can't contact support because they're overseas and they never answer their phone or their email. And 3, you can't contact anybody, and so there's no return process, there's no refund, and you're out $200, which could have gone towards a $600 mixer from a more reputable manufacturer. So there is something to be said about going with the well-known equipment. But the flip side of that coin is that sometimes there are newer pieces of equipment that do the same thing for less money. It pays to do your homework as far as what's new, what it does, and are you really comparing apples and oranges, or apples to apples, right? So, and there's tons of resources out there for writing upgrade proposals. There's people like Paul, there's people like me, there's people like Chip, and I'm going to have a question for Chip in a minute so he can actually feel like he's part of this hangout. But it's really up to you to fully understand what writing an upgrade proposal is like. What does that entail? It's a pretty big responsibility. You have to understand the concept of good stewardship to make sure you're not wasting money, because good stewardship is not about how much money you save. It's about how much money you don't waste, and those are two vastly different concepts. So make sure you understand that. And I think Paul and I both will make ourselves available to have those conversations with any of you in the communities, the Church Tech communities that we're part of, to help explain that. But Chip, I'd like to get you in on the conversation. What are some of the experiences that you've had in terms of writing upgrade proposals, or just being involved in that process, either from afar or personally?
Well, I've been on both sides of the fence. So, in a church where we receive proposals, and then I'm not an integrator like yourself. I'm more of consultant, or I write video proposal for a video shoot I'm doing. So I'm going on a smaller level, but people are constantly asking me, like you guys, what camera should I buy? Instead of getting one camera or 3 cameras, well, what are you trying to accomplish? I mean, what do you know? I just want to stream. Well, okay, that's good. So here's some choices, All right. Somebody told me about the Blackmagic camera. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's just I'm not Blackmagic camera, the Blackmagic, box and this and that. And use Wirecast. So I think it's more of, we all know budgets are limited. We all know everybody wants the most bang in for your buck. But then I also get, well, Church X does this and they use Y. So why can't we get it too? So I want to run this proposal by you. So I think people need second opinions. I got a guy who just called me the other day from the church in Washington, D.C. I might email one of their leaders and say, hey, run the proposal by me. Let me run it through some friends just to look at it, just to make sure everything's on the up and up. I may not have all the answers, which I don't, but I know somebody who I trust that may. You know what I mean? So I think that churches, stewardship also is doing due diligence, because you need to get second opinions. And I know so many churches that go with one opinion and go with that one. You would never buy a car without looking at 2 different dealers. You would never buy a house without looking at 2 different houses. Why do people at churches buy the first proposal they see? So it's just bizarre to me. And it's because they don't know any better. They just know that so-and-so, Deacon so-and-so recommended John, so let's use John. But nobody questions it. But then when they get burned, they all blame,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's more of stewardship with doing your due diligence and research. I just never, anything, to me, over $5,000, over $1,000, you need to get 2 proposals. That should just be, whether you're a small church of of 40 people or a mega church. I mean, you should have to, and that's just from the business world. You just get 2 to 3 proposals. And sometimes the lowest proposal isn't always the best, you know? And the lowest isn't always the best. It's, I'm all about service. So I'll always tell people to err on the side of service. What is their history with customer service? The integrator or the person, when you call them when there's an issue, can you get them? And everybody says yes to that. But the real truth is, ask their customers.
Well, yeah, because experience doesn't lie.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. Not a bad set of opinions there, honestly. I'm working with one church right now that the due diligence, as you're saying, is they have to get 3 proposals, and mine is one of them. And it's refreshing to hear a church say, okay, we're going to get 3 different proposals, but we're not necessarily going to choose, the least expensive one. And that's refreshing, because let's say that my proposal came in at $15,000, right? Somebody else's came in at 17, and the third one came in at 10. I would have to seriously question what equipment are they speccing, what corners are they cutting, are they even making a profit if 2 of us came in within the same ballpark and the other one's so much drastically lower. If everybody's in the same ballpark, then that's probably a good sign. But if there's wide differences in cost, then you have to wonder, did somebody miss something on the RFP, the request for proposal? Did they not truly understand what was expected as far as a finished, complete, working, and functional system? And also, make sure that you compare them. You get multiple proposals, right? Assuming you go and ask for them. Make sure you compare them. What are you getting in one proposal that you're not getting in another? Do they include training on the new equipment? That's an important one. You get a lot of what the industry calls trunk slammers that will come in a couple days. They'll install a new sound system, let's say, and they're gone down the road. They got more stuff in their trunk that they're trying to sell. Well, okay, you've got this new equipment. If you didn't understand how to use the old equipment, you're probably not going to be very well off to know how to operate the new stuff, right? So make sure training is part of any proposals that you get as far as upgraded equipment. Before I forget, I do want to have Paul talk about buying for the present versus buying for the future, and explain to us the difference, because there is one, and why it's so important.
Yeah. This is one thing that I see churches make a mistake on all the time, is they think, oh, well, this is perfectly fine today. And then they buy that thing because it's usually the less expensive piece. And then in 1 year, 3 years, however long they want it to last, it doesn't last that entire length. The warranty's probably up. And then when they go to replace it or have it fixed, they find that, oh, well, that was kind of a bargain basement about to be discontinued, or it was discontinued, or something like that, and now there's nothing that works with it, or there's no equivalent replacement part, or something like that. So the thing that pops into my head immediately is, it's 2014 as we're recording this, and I keep hearing churches say things like, well, so we're not sure whether we should go HD or not. No, it's 2014. You absolutely should, as a bare minimum, go HD, because you're not buying this for today. If you were renting the equipment for 1 week, maybe you can get by with an SD system. Maybe. But when it comes to thinking, well, we really want this, let's look forward into the future to 2019 or 2024, if you want it to last 10 years, do you think anyone is going to have a standard definition video system in 2024? I'm not even sure that 4K will be the standard in 2024. I think it might be even something more than that. So the idea that you're going to save a little bit of money by getting the discontinued equipment or the bargain basement equipment or whatever right now, just it gets on my last nerve. I did a video system for a church probably 3 years ago, and I told them then, look, it's your system, you get what you want, but you're only saving $500 on this system by going with SD over HD, and in 3 to 5 years when one of these cameras breaks and you can't buy another SD camera because the price of technology goes down, so now the HD cameras cost that same amount of price, and you're thinking, why would we get another camera? And they don't match because one is really high res and the other one not so much. You're going to be kicking yourself. Well, thankfully they listened to my vision casting in this case, and they went with HD, and they've got two 1080p robotic cameras on their wall to this day that they can grow into, and they used them 2 years ago, they're using them today, and then they can use them another 2 years, and that's 6 years of useful life on these cameras, where if they'd gone with SD, right now they'd start to be looking kind of old, kind of like black and white during the 80s, and next year they'd look really old, and the year after that really, really old. And that's just the way the technology is. It just ages so much more quickly. You don't want to buy technology that is already out of date. Computers are a great example of this. A lot of times people will go, well, I can get a computer for $250. Well, if you're doing word processing, maybe that's fine. But do not get a presentation computer for $250 unless that is like an employee price that really the computer ought to be $1,000. I mean, really, that's the only exception I could think is if you've got a high-end piece of gear and you're buying the cheapest piece you can, you're just asking trouble because you're not buying for the life of the piece, you're buying for today, and that's the problem. You really need to think, what is the entire life, and projecting out, where will I be in comparison to the rest of society when it's time to replace this piece? And if it's going to feel like the 1970s when you replace your equipment in 10 years, then you haven't bought enough gear. You haven't bought a nice enough piece of equipment that will actually last. Now, if you want it to last 2 years, that's a different discussion, but I'd still say think quality and something that lasts. I think that's better stewardship.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, buddy. However, on the flip side of that, we have churches that want to spend egads of money, right? Piles and piles of money on equipment that they really don't need now or in the future. And you see a lot of copycatting going on. Well, we went and visited this church and we saw that they had 38 moving lights, right? Well, we're a traditional church, but we got to stay relevant, so we got to get 38 moving lights because that's what they had. Well, for goodness sakes, at $3, $4, $5, $6 a pop, that adds up really quickly. And if you got a traditional worship service, there's no place for moving lights. So, you got to kind of wonder why people are copycatting rather than finding what it is that they need specifically for their particular vision, where they're going as a church. I keep seeing article after article after article in all the trade magazines for houses of worship and church tech that say, people are just hopping on this live video streaming bandwagon like it's going out of style. And, honestly, if you're a mobile church, you have enough headaches with tech as it is without adding live streaming to it. Now, if you're a satellite church, that's a totally different thing. However, most, shall we say, permanent churches, that have their own buildings and, they've invested in having a structure and that kind of thing, you got to ask yourself why. Why do you want to live stream? Do you have a specific goal in mind, or are you trying to keep up with the Joneses, as it were? So question your motives. Make sure that you understand where your church is going. And, sometimes you got to tell leadership no. If they want to upgrade equipment and they can't tell you the vision, I would walk away from it. I would say, I am not going to upgrade. I'm not going to write a proposal. I'm not going to go seek recommendations or proposals until you can tell me what the vision is. What is the point of upgrading equipment? Now, if the equipment's broken and not working and it sounds and looks terrible and the lights are burned out and all that, that's fine, upgrade away. But still ask the question, what's the vision? Because you need to know where your systems need to end up. What capabilities do they need to be able to deliver down the road? And that's what Paul's talking about. And I couldn't agree with him more on the importance of that one aspect. Writing church or upgrade proposals, having written 9 or 10 of them alone this year, there are a lot of questions that you have to get the answers to in order to make sure that you're not wasting money, that the systems are going to meet the demand now and in the future, that the people who are going to be using the equipment really understand what the capabilities are going to be, what problems it's going to fix, if any, and what additional capabilities they're going to have. And then you got to make sure that they're trained, that there is a plan for training. If you don't know how to kind of manage that or train on your own, then go find somebody that will or that does, because like I said, you don't want to set your people up to fail. You don't want to set yourself up to fail either. And what I find is kind of like with my experience, I was set up to fail in my former church, in the light that they would trust me enough to ask me to create an upgrade proposal, but they're not going to trust me enough to actually accept what I tell them that they need. They need somebody outside to come in and tell them what they need. And while that really wounded me deeply at the time, I have come to find out that this is very common in not only church environments, but say marriages. It's one thing to have your wife tell you, well, I've noticed this as a pattern and you need to do this to stop the pattern because it's negative. That's one side of the coin, right? It's completely different when you have, say, a health and fitness coach come in and say the very same exact piece of advice. You're going to lend more credibility to the health and fitness coach than you are to your wife. And the reason for that is because when you're in a situation where you're in a group or in a partnership, let's say, you lose objectivity in the eyes of the other person or the other people. So in other words, they can't trust that you are objective enough to know what's best, let's say. And it's unfortunate, and it's not universal, but it's common enough that it's something that you need to know about. So it may do you well to ask the question, look, I'm willing to write an upgrade proposal, but I need you to be willing to take it seriously. Because if you're not going to take it seriously, then I'm not going to do it. And because it's only going to create negativity, it's going to create wounded feelings, it's not going to bring about anything good. So that's my personal experience in regards to that topic. Chip, do you have anything to add on that? Got to unmute himself. Well, maybe not. Paul, why don't you talk to us a little bit about, just maybe kind of walk us through a process or a story of, you said that you had helped a church upgrade or get a video system. What are some of the steps that were kind of involved in that from the time that they approached you?
Yeah, so they told me what they wanted, and I made sure I asked plenty of questions to clarify what they actually wanted. It turns out that the backstory to this was that someone had died and left some money specifically for the purpose of having the pastor do what he wanted to do. And he had a background in video, so he wanted to be able to record the service and put up video on Vimeo. So he knew a little bit about that, but not enough to actually recommend this stuff himself. So first off, I always, just having used robotic cameras, I myself tend to prefer operator controlled cameras on tripods. I just think they look better. But the problem with this situation was they didn't want to sacrifice any floor space. So since they didn't want to sacrifice any floor space, and we haven't invented anti-gravity jetpacks yet, we had to go with robotic cameras. So that's what they'd asked for. So I made sure that I was clear the limitations, that the movement isn't as smooth as it could be. It would be better to set the shot, then take the shot, as opposed to taking the shot while you're zooming in and panning to the right, and doing an artistic, smooth movement, because it's just going to feel robotic with the cameras that they went to. So we did tons of clarifying. I put together a proposal, and I was absolutely clear with them where my money was coming from. That I didn't have a relationship with any of these vendors. I don't care one way or the other who you go with, but I think these are the best pieces for your situation. Other people might have a relationship with a certain vendor, and they might get a good deal on it and charge you MSRP and then keep the difference. But in my case, that's not how I did it. So I made sure that they knew how I was paid, and I met with the original guy who I talked to. I met with his committee. I met with the pastor. We put together a proposal and put it together in front of their business meeting, and they voted on it. I gave them kind of a good, better, and a best solution, so that they had some choices. I didn't say, okay, this is the only way to do it and it's my way or the highway. Instead, I said, okay, here's what I would recommend. Here's a cheaper way that I would not recommend, but it'll get what you want accomplished just barely. Won't be future-proof, but it'll do it. That was the SD version. And then I think I had a higher-end version that included ProPresenter. It included a couple other things. So that was the process that I went through. I listened to what the pastor said that he wanted as part of the system, and included that. As it turned out, there were a couple of things in the background that I didn't know of when I made the proposal that's always worth figuring out. I don't know if this was a mistake, a misunderstanding, or what, but they had two committees doing this, asking for the same proposal. Or there was some overlap or something, and neither of them knew that the other one was doing it. So the guy that I was working with was part of the newly formed video committee, and then there was the old-fashioned audio committee that was also working on it. And the audio committee didn't have any idea what they were doing. So when they heard that I was doing it, first they felt like they were being stepped on, but then they felt a sense of relief that they didn't have to try and figure out stuff that they didn't do. For example, their chief audio volunteer, who was in charge of the audio committee, called technical directing acrobatics. He said, "I don't know how to do these acrobatics." So it didn't even have the vocabulary for it. So the fact that these cameras were RS-232 controlled and they were on the edge of being controlled at the distance that they needed them to be controlled, there's no way he could have figured that out. So it was good that they brought me in, but just there were some things in the background that just kind of made it difficult. And I think that was a lesson for me, that you need to find out as many details as possible. Not only technical, but personnel. How the politics of the church work. In seminary we called that the polity, the organization. Because my church, if the senior pastor wanted it, he'd recommend it to the board, and while not always rubber stamping, tended to follow pretty well what the senior pastor had. In this church, they'd bring it up for a vote in business meeting, and most of the time they tended to agree, but not always. So we didn't know going in for sure that this was going to happen. So just all those little details are things that, as someone who is coming in from the outside, you may not know. You may not know, oh yeah, the senior pastor said, oh, it's a done deal, but it's not a done deal. Or the senior pastor says, I don't like what you've done here, but then the laity rise up and bam, they're on top of it. So it's just a large amount of variation from church to church, and so that's something else that you need to think of as you're submitting your proposal, is exactly what is the procedure that this is going to go through, and is it going to be like a 2-year-long thing that by the time you get it done, everything isn't for sale anymore? Who knows? So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, that's an important one, especially, like you said, 2 years down the road, everything's going to change. You may have one piece of equipment that can do the job in the old proposal. So that's certainly something to bear in mind. One thing that I wanted to cover was, when you're asked to write an upgrade proposal, it's usually by, say, a pastor, right? And on the one hand, it's a sign of respect and it's a sign of privilege, that they trust you enough to do that. But flip side, you really need to know what you're getting into. You need to know your limitations, be it experience, be it knowledge, be it both. Um, and that's not me trying to say that you're all ignorant or anything like that. I mean, there's tons of things that I don't know. I'm always learning, but that's an approach to AV that I have. I try very hard not to come off as a know-it-all. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And for the times that it doesn't, I'm sorry. It's not my intent. Just know that. I never want to be somebody that's looked at as having all the answers. Unfortunately, I can't really control that. But I'm getting off topic. I've coined this phrase a number of years ago, know what you don't know. And it kind of sounds counterintuitive, right? Well, how am I supposed to know what I don't know? Well, part of that is by figuring out you've got a pretty good handle on what live sound mixing entails and what you need to know in order to do the best that you can do. However, that also probably means that you really don't have experience or knowledge in lighting, right? If that's a weak area for you because you know nothing about it, that's something you don't know. So on the one hand, it's really easy to figure out what you don't know. But on the other hand, it's not. And I can tell you one thing, that if you hang around a bunch of professional system integrators for any length of time, people who do this for a living, write upgrade proposals, walk not only churches but companies through upgrading AV, installing AV, training on how to use AV, you'll very quickly understand what you don't know. So I'm not necessarily encouraging that, but it would not be a bad idea to start fostering relationships with system integrators, developing a network of people that, even if you are really experienced in all four aspects of tech, audio, video, lighting, and projection, to have somebody that you can kind of bounce ideas off of, say, hey, you know what? I've been asked to do this upgrade proposal. I've created kind of what I think is going to work. Would you mind taking a look at it? Most of them, they'd be happy to do that. Not because they see money signs when you walk in the door, but because down deep, they really just want to help. So get the trade magazines, Church Production Magazine, Technologies for Worship Magazine. Those are just two off the top of my head. Get involved with communities and groups on social media, like Church Tech, like Church Mag, like Tech Applied, AV Install Greatness on Facebook, AV Install Nightmares on Facebook. I mean, that one has taught me so much. These guys who do this for a living, taking pictures of installations that would make you cringe because of how people have decided to do these things. So surround yourself, essentially, is my core message here. Surround yourself with people that know more than you, and that will only serve as a good foundation and a good anchor for you to learn, to ask questions, to bounce ideas off of, really to be that support that you're going to need through an upgrade process, especially if you're writing the upgrade process or proposal. And I'm curious if either one of you can feel free to jump in here, if Paul or Chip, if you've had experience working with a system integrator or being in a situation where you needed to bounce ideas off of somebody else, and it just it worked out better than you thought.
Well, I really haven't had a lot of times where I have worked with system integrators. We uh, at my current church, we've been around since May 2nd, 1999, and basically it was all volunteer driven, even when it shouldn't have been necessarily. I mean, I told you the story of the two projectors and the switcher way back when. And until we moved to our current location, the church staff hired an integrator to help us out, and I suppose maybe that was a positive experience, because while we were still SD, we were still running everything composite, etc. It was just a situation where they allowed the technical people to help in a way where at the end of it I understood how the entire system worked, because I knew I'd terminated this RG6. You know, I knew these all went here and the other end was backstage, and I knew that, and then some of these go here, some of these go here, etc. So it was a much better situation than what happened in the current building. And I ought to be clear that we moved to this location, then we expanded. So about 5 years ago, we built a new sanctuary where before we renovated a space in this building. So we built a new sanctuary, so that was a new system integrator. And they didn't want those of us who were technical helping out even with the grunt work. Like, I offered to carry stuff. They didn't want me to help. Cables, didn't want me to help. And I really just wanted to be around them to understand what they were thinking about every piece, so that when they left, I knew it. There was another guy who was around doing the same thing, and he's since left the church. So it would have been valuable if I'd known what was going on with that particular system. Now, since we've had some staff people that are technical and on staff at the church, and they wrote all the stuff and they understand it, but that was something that came with time, as opposed to something where at the end of the install, as part of installing everything, we understood it. And I think that that is just remarkably different. And I understand the second system integrator. I understand what they were thinking about. You know, we don't want to have the liability to know that you did it wrong because you're just a volunteer, whatever that kind of thinking was. But as it turns out, we were in the video booth, which is very nice now. We were on folding tables for 2 or 3 months until we had a new hire video director who came in and said, well, screw it, they're never coming back, it seems like, so we're just going to have to put together these racks and these desks and everything ourselves, because otherwise it's just not going to get done. And it could be that they were planning on coming back and still would have, but it was most of the way completed, and we'd just been sitting there for a long time waiting for it to be completely completed, and it really just left a bad taste in all of our mouths. First, that they wouldn't let us touch anything, and then they left it undone, and then we had to touch everything. So it was like not good. And
Well, it
to
kind of
this day,
begs the question, what was the point?
right, exactly.
Yeah. No,
You
I
know,
I understand completely. And I for one, I welcome any help I can get from the local church, because when I'm gone, right, from the install, the training's done, who's left at the church to manage the system, to manage the equipment, to operate the equipment, to troubleshoot and fix things when if they go wrong. So that's not going to be me, because I'm not there every week. And I mean, that's just unrealistic to expect me to be available every week to every single church that I help. So if I can do diagrams to help them understand how it's supposed to be hooked together, and I can get them to help me pull cable to, um, if they've got the aptitude for it, to terminate cable, yeah, okay. I may have to go in and double check their work, but you know what? If I got to double check their work, that's a simple connection. It's not a matter of me having to go through and pull the cable myself. So in the end, it saves me time. And if I'm going through and double checking their work anyway, then I don't really foresee any problems. But I can understand where they're coming from, certainly. But I just, as talking for me personally, I like to have as much involvement as possible in the install, because it just increases ownership, and you don't get those situations where, like you did, where you're kind of left in limbo for months on end, not really sure, are they coming back? Are they going to finish this? What's going on, right? And it's kind of actually surprising that there was no communication as far as what their plans were. So um, I'm not. Chip is still in the Hangout, but I'm not sure if he's actually hearing us or not. Chip, would you mind checking in and let me know if you're still with us?
I'm here. I'm here. I'm sorry, guys.
All
I'm
right.
listening.
Very good.
I'm hearing
Very
everything
good.
you guys are saying. It's good. I'm just I'm here listening to everything you guys are saying. Make some really good points.
What, Chip, I'm just curious really quickly here. We're getting down towards the end. What are some pointers that you could give people in regards to, considerations that they need to think about when asked to do a proposal? Um, what do they need to, like, what steps would you recommend they take after they're asked?
After they ask for the proposal, so I think the first
Well,
thing. I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
I think the first thing people need to know is they need to know what what their outcome is. And I know they may not be tech experts. A lot of people, like you said previously, hey, I just want to stream. Hey, I just want to project the screens, or I just want, I think they need to be more specific. And there's always one person, guy or gal at a church who is a resident tech expert and is the proposal. What's a good word I want to say? Proposer. The people who shoot down proposals from the sky, like like drones. There's always somebody at a church that does that. That's their sole purpose in life, is to shoot every proposal you have down. Right, Tim?
Oh my goodness, you have no
There's
idea.
always one person at the church. Always. That's their only job in life.
Yeah.
But no, all jokes aside, I think that people need to they they need to have a semblance of direction. Let me give you a quick story. So we at my former church in Baltimore, my pastor knew that nobody in the church knew a whole bunch about installation, so he got this guy from Orlando to fly in, and he worked at Disney and a church guy and some other places. So we were all a little bit skeptical of the guy, because whenever a consultant comes in, we're like, yeah, knowing this is the best interest. So, but really nice, gave us some good considerations, good follow up. But I think that he knew what we wanted to do, and we wanted to go on broadcast television. So we needed a 3-camera shoot. We needed this. We needed switcher. We had screens, integration. We ended up going with a local company, but his consultation was really good and priceless. So I think that having a leader at the top may not be techie, but needs to at least have a vision for what needs to happen and where you want to go. And like you said, buying for the future, not buying for the present. So those cameras are still good today. And we had to buy those cameras back in '04, '02, no, '04, '05, maybe, '05. So, 8, 9 years later, HD cameras still are good and, running stuff from them. I mean, it's going to be time to upgrade them in a year or probably 2 years, something like that. But I think that's the key. And then having somebody who is a champion in the church, I mean, on the church side, and who knows and that can push things through. And I think as proposal writers, a lot of times we get so caught up in the technical details and not in the church politics thing, because a lot of times you can win proposals by just knowing who the key influencer is at the church. You don't even have to have the best proposal. Sometimes you just have the best person to push your idea through. And on that end, it is kind of like a sales job. A lot of technical people are just, hey, it's my facts, it's good stuff. But sometimes it's about the relationship. So, I mean, you'll have just a good relationship, and people trust you. And if they trust you, they're going to hire you. That's what I feel. If they trust you, they're going to hire you. But on the side with churches, I think that boards and committees are good, but I think that sometimes that like somebody sent me a proposal to just review, to just get an outside, somebody who has no skin in the game, is not a vendor, to just look it over, and I'm not talking about doing an in-depth look, just scan it over, see what it is, ask some questions, and send it back. There's nothing wrong with a second opinion. If I had a heart condition, I'm going to get 3 opinions, and that's going to be a surgery for my life. So if I'm spending, $100,000, I'm going to get at least 2 opinions. So I keep on thinking like that.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. One thing, okay, 3 things that I wanted to say kind of to wrap it up. And Paul, I think maybe you'll appreciate this phrase, but I really want to make sure that when people are creating these upgrade proposals, that they're not creating a system of upgraded equipment that is equatable to renting a system, because it's so low cost and is basically going to have to be replaced in 2 years. We kind of already covered that topic, but I did want to kind of introduce that phrase. So Paul, feel free to borrow and use that to your heart's content. I thought it was kind of a clever turn of phrase. But the other thing is, just to kind of bring in some business-based thoughts here. A lot of times on a balance sheet in accounting, you'll have a list of income or revenue, and you'll have a list of expenses. And a lot of times companies will list marketing as an expense. And I really want to challenge that, because I think it's more of an investment. It's not just a line item on a balance sheet as far as just an expense like office supplies, because you're really spending that money to make more money. And in a lot of ways, churches need to kind of shift their thinking to tech being an investment rather than an expense. Because if you look at it as an expense, then that's all it will ever be. And you'll never understand why it takes so much, well, I shouldn't say so much money, but why it takes the money that it does to obtain the equipment and to keep it running and to train your people and all that. If you look at it as an investment, as an evangelistic tool, and Paul, you're really going to resonate with this, all of a sudden it changes your perspective. It changes how you think about it, because If we didn't have lights, the live audience wouldn't be able to see. If we didn't have sound, the live audience wouldn't be able to hear. If we didn't have video and live streaming, then the people outside of the church would never know what was happening. So it's absolutely an evangelistic tool, and I would challenge anybody who says otherwise. Simply because you're taking the message and you are amplifying it, you're making it better, you're making it more accessible, all of that. So, and I'm pretty sure Paul's going to want to dovetail on this, but I also want to just quickly say, when you're thinking of it as an investment, then you need to also consider the fact that tech is an ongoing investment. And that doesn't mean every 2 years you're buying, a $50,000 camera or something like that. What that means is that you have expendables, you have batteries, you have real costs in operating a tech department, tech equipment, be it just power. But you also got to realize with quality equipment, eventually something will go wrong. You got machines that are being made by fallible human beings. Something will break, something will go wrong. You need to, as part of your investment in an ongoing basis, you need to be prepared to make repairs to your equipment, to upkeep it, to possibly replace it. So you need to start thinking about these things and be thinking about tech differently. And I think when we have that mind shift, that perspective shift, then all of a sudden things change. And honestly, I think the best person or the best people that are equipped to do that is senior leadership, pastoral leadership. Vision cast that as an evangelistic tool, and I think you're going to see amazing things happen. All right, Paul, take it away.
Well, you're right. I couldn't agree more. I was just thinking about this just in light of good stewardship of the physical space, right? If you don't have lights, then the only time you can have church is during the day, right? If you don't have sound, that limits the number of people that can hear what's being said. If you don't have video, it limits the number of people who can see what's happening. So those three things are absolutely important. I mean, I don't think that there is a church in North America that doesn't have some sort of theological reason for this to be the case. Like, I will exclude the Amish in what I'm about to say, but with the exception of the Amish, if you've got a church that's bigger than a house church, you probably have some form of sound reinforcement. So I want you to think about the rest of the reinforcement as that same thing. We're not talking about a flashy way to be the cool hip church. We're talking about using your space to the best of your ability. And if all the kids go to the top back of the balcony to sit, not because they like it, but because then they don't have to see the message, they don't have to hear the message, and they can play on their smartphones if you're lucky and do worse things if you're not, then that can be solved with technology. And technology isn't equipment, by the way. It's not electronics. Technology is just ideas that we have come up as humans. We've come up with these ideas about how to make things better. A book is a technology. It is a better technology than the scroll because you don't have to rewind it when you're done watching it or reading it. You can just flip to wherever you want. Well, the Kindle, in a lot of ways, is better than a book. So while the Kindle is an electronic device, it's just an invention. And these are just inventions. God has created the universe so that we could make them. We shouldn't be surprised that He made the universe in such a way that we could do things that enable us to get the message out. And that's really what matters. It really matters that lives and eternities are hanging in the balance. Every person that doesn't know about Jesus is still someone that He loved enough to have died for, and He wants to be in a relationship with them. Are we just going to say, no, no, because I'm not comfortable with video, we'll let those people go to hell? What? That's offensive, but that's the way that we act sometimes. And so really call a spade, and do whatever it takes to make the message clear. Just removing obstacles. That's what this is about. Making it so that people can hear, making so that people can see, making it so that people can experience the message. People that haven't heard, whether they're people in your neighborhood, or we've got people on our live stream from India, from occasionally we'll get someone from China, from places where it's hard to hear the gospel. Like in North America, it's fairly easy. You can find a church. In India, kind of difficult. But a lot of people in India like technology, so they might just happen upon a live stream. That is a way that we're using technology to change lives and eternities, and I think that's what the church should be all about. Not because of the technology, but because people are all that matter. And that, I think, is exactly what you thought I was going to say, isn't it, Tim?
You know me well, buddy. Well, I think that perfectly wraps us up. And but real quickly, I just wanted to point that out. That's going on outside my window right now. It's freaking awesome. Day is dying here in the West, as they say. But I just want to encourage all of you. I know that probably a lot of you out there are dealing with a situation much like we've described. You've been asked to do an upgrade proposal. You either don't know where to start, you're not really sure what they're asking for, you don't know really what you need, and I would just say reach out to these communities, that I mentioned. Church Tech, Google Plus, you have Church Tech, you have Adventist Church Tech, you have Tech Applied, and you have Church Mag. Those are the four that I know about. Those are the four that I'm a part of. I'm sure that there are others out there. On Facebook, you have Gurus of Tech. Those guys are just gold mines of information. And AV Install Nightmares and AV Install, what's the other one? AV Install Greatness, that's the other one. So just reach out to somebody. If it's not online, reach out to a system integrator that's local to you. Reach out to CCI Solutions, to Full Compass, to B&H. Be persistent and be stubborn about getting the information that you need. And as Chip mentioned, don't necessarily just take one person's word for it. A lot of people out there, a lot of consultants are out there, they're hooked up as dealers for certain brands, for certain manufacturers, and what they are recommending to you may not be what's actually best for your particular situation. So, I'm not saying distrust people, but as Chip mentioned, get second opinions, get other opinions. Educate yourself to the point where you can make an informed decision. And if you don't trust yourself to do that, talk with your leadership, explain your reservations, and say, I really would rather bring somebody else in to do this, or to help me do this, so that we're getting exactly what we need. So with that, I'm going to thank Chip and Paul, and we'll see you next week where we'll have another topic.